David?
Yes.
It's been a while. Today might be rusty. I think we mentioned it briefly before I left. I forget which episode it was.
Yes, Dane.
I went out of town for a couple weeks.
Uh-huh.
So we might have missed a couple major events. We're sorry about that.
I'm a little off center, aren't I?
But as you already are aware,
I should be facing this way.
we recorded a couple episodes before I left, so you never missed one. We always keep you at the front of our minds, no matter what's going on in our personal lives.
Try to remember how to cast pods right now.
But now that we're back, and by the way, before we get too much further, I want to apologize ahead of time. You might hear it in my voice. I got a little something. I don't think it's the vid.
We both got a little. I did catch. I got them white lines now. If you know what I'm saying, I got them bodies.
Oh, yeah. David's
them
impervious.
Bodies that are against things.
David's impervious to COVID for the foreseeable future.
But we can't say definitively that I...
Yeah, I don't, by the way. Check my accolades, my paperwork.
Check them.
But you might hear from time to time on this episode, I have a little cough. I'll obviously move away from the mic, and our audio guy, Chris, over at Podsworth. If you need any audio services, check him out, Chris at Podsworth. They will take care of you. Anyway.
.com or .net?
Yeah, I think something like that.
Just put it in.
Look it up. Reach out to us. We'll put you in contact with Chris. But he will do his best for if I do any coughing on this episode, which is a distinct possibility.
But please do forgive us if one sneaks through.
To cut it out as much as possible. But other than that, we'll try not to hinder the show for you on our return episode from a couple-week hiatus. Now, today is a happy occasion. Why, David? What happened?
Because we have this
while
bottle
Dane
of
was traveling.
Fine champagne. I don't know why, but why do we have? Is it because one of us had a baby?
No, thank God. Yet
in this economy. Anyway, so
with this baby formula shortage, hell to the no.
Titty milk running dry and formula not to be found. It's desperate times. But why would we have a fine bottle of champagne?
Right. So actually, the last up-to-date episode that we recorded before I left was.
And by the way, can we remark upon this? Like, we picked the worst time not to be able to do current events. What with Amber Heard shitting on pillows, that was pretty much it. Like, I had a lot of jokes about Amber Heard, and I feel like a lot of other comedians got to it before I could.
Listen, a lot of stuff went down. Obviously, the Supreme Court leak went down, the Buffalo mass shooting thing, like lots of stuff happened.
Apparently, Ukraine doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, we're on to the next thing. We're now on to, what is it, monkeypox?
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing we have to be concerned about now.
Vaccine ready for that.
Yeah, so the world has changed a lot in a couple weeks, but the last, up-to-date episode we recorded before I left, episode 92, if you'll recall, we talked about the Governance Disinformation Board at the DHS, which is going to be...
we lovingly call it, the Ministry of Truth.
Exactly.
Very Orwellian.
Which was headed by, I'm going to let David do the honors on the last name, Anina what, David?
Jankovic.
Oh, very nicely done. Very nice. I thought you were going to go with the alternative name that you did. There you go.
There you go.
So we had recorded an episode talking about how 1984ish that was. And before I could even come back from this brief hiatus, it's been axed. And I think, hence the bottle of champagne, that it was...
Fine champagne.
That it was David and I's illuminating...
Listen.
Hard-hitting coverage of that whole situation on episode 92, which caused them to step back and say, what, maybe we shouldn't do this.
The way I look at it, dear listener and viewer, is that if the women's national team can bitch their way into the same amount of salary as the men's national team can to get compensated by the men's national team, we can at least pop a little top to defeating the Ministry of Truth. Very Orwellian style. So
that's right.
Hopefully this doesn't spew all over.
So celebrate with us. David, the honors. Hey!
Chris will have to get that in post. But anyway. So we popped the top.
Pour me up.
Please let me. I'm going to give you a healthy pour. It's not going to be your, usual steakhouse pour. It's going to be the clubhouse pour, right to the rim.
So David and I, we will, obviously be as professional as possible at the beginning of the episode. And then as we consume more of our concoction here as
one
the
of us
episode
being
goes
more of a
on.
man than the other will probably hold their shit together more than the other one.
No promises on the cogency of my thought or the articulateness of my expressing of my thought.
By the way, what do you call the foam? When it's a beer, you call the like head, carbonation head. But what do you call champagne? Like just fuzzies?
Well, listen, in this context, I call it sweet, sweet victory.
Well, hold on. I gotta tink my glass one more time, obviously.
Yes, and we should tink as well.
All right.
So, David.
To defeating Orwellianness for at least a couple of weeks.
To the Weapons of Meme Destruction cast and crew, and most importantly, its loving listeners and supporters.
There you go.
We have taken down one leg of the Federal Leviathan. On to the next one.
For now. Tink. Tastes like victory.
Yes, it does. So, with that being said, just a little bit of meat on the bones. It's not a total victory yet. They have quote unquote suspended it. Nina has tendered a resignation letter. I'm sure at some point they'll come up with some fairy tale reason for why they need to bring it back or whatever. But thanks to us and exclusively us, not the rest of the other people on social media and other services that, also said that this was probably not the way to go.
Right here.
It was all us, baby. It was the 141st political podcast in Australia that
those
brought
also
down.
Reached out and said, mate, you shouldn't be doing that over there. All right? These white pointers are a problem. But you know what's a bigger problem? What's her name again? Not Jen Psaki, but Jankovic.
Yeah.
That Jen Jankovic. You need to stop her in the tracks. Nina.
The easiest part of her name is the one that you messed up.
Well, I was stuck on the last name. I didn't want to fuck up. Because I feel like it's more inappropriate to fuck up the last name than a first name.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
So, with that little celebration out of the way, let's get into the main part of the episode, shall we?
Let's.
Welcome to Weapons and Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 95, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/95. You can find us on any podcast app, but you can also find us on video on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, and link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Jump in those comment sections. Apologies from me, not necessarily from David, because he doesn't interact on TikTok at all, as some of the more veteran listeners
got 3
know.
likes.
But I've been kind of
at least 5
out of pocket on TikTok as I've been away in the last couple of weeks. That's not an excuse. This is an apology. And I will be back there shortly. And hopefully David will at some point in the rest of his life.
I'm going to go ahead and preface you if you are a listener. I'm probably not going to do the same thing that he does. I'm probably going to just be like, this is what I'm cooking today. Welcome to my life. This is David's kitchen kind of shit.
Yeah, it's going to be
a little lighter side. Whereas, it's more heavy-handed when he's asking questions, trotting down the liberal agenda, boosting up the not conservative agenda, but the libertarian
getting a word
agenda.
Out for the libertarian.
Right.
Yeah.
Saying taxation is theft. I'm going to be a little more lighthearted. Just be like, I eat broccoli and chicken.
We like to treat our podcast-specific platforms, meaning the episodes clips will come out on them, but not the episodes themselves. We like to treat those as more of a smorgasbord, get to know the hosts kind of stuff. So whether you frequent our Twitter, our TikTok, our Instagram, whatever, it is related to the podcast, of course, because,
it's us.
Hashtag branding. But there is more to us than just, pontificating on the...
To steal a phrase from Batman. Rachel, this isn't who I am underneath. Underneath, I am more. And then she says, Bruce, it's not who you are underneath, but what do you do that defines you? And then he says it later. It's a whole
okay.
thing.
Yeah. I
didn't
spend a lot of time memorizing the Rachel Dawes lines.
Right. Yeah, and then they killed her off.
My bad.
They turned her into Maggie Gyllenhaal and then. Anyway, spoiler alert. Go ahead.
Please follow all of that. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Do everything you can to boost the algos.
To boob the algos.
Yeah, boob the algos for us.
Boob the algos.
That's how you can help the show for free.
That's what we can do. We can
boobs.
We get more boobs on weapons of beam destruction. We're gonna get some more boobs on here.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what.
That's the key ingredient that we're missing.
Both political and otherwise.
That's the key ingredient. So do all that, please, and thank you. I have noticed that we've got a few more reviews on Spotify, still holding that 5-star rating. So thank you to those of you that have rated us. Please do so on other platforms as well. And if you would like to support the show in a financial way, head over to wdpodcast.com and go to the Support Our Work tab, and you can support us at any dollar amount, one-time amount, or a monthly amount. Check out the options over there and see what you get as bonuses. And we appreciate you, whether you give us money or just, click like on our videos and share them.
After that sticky little subject, can we hop into the topic?
We're in. Today's topic is the baby formula shortage. That has been dominating the headlines for obvious reasons.
And as males that identify as males that have opinions, we're going to speak wholeheartedly on this subject.
So first of all, before we get into the particular vein of this topic, because a lot of people are talking about it in a lot of different ways. Some people will juxtapose it with the $40 billion of extra military aid to Ukraine and say, why can't we put that into baby formula here? There's tons of narratives you can go down with this route, but we want to make sure that on the weapons of mass destruction, we always front run with the fact that our first concern is with those people adversely impacted by it. Obviously, the babies who need the formula and the young mothers who need to, be able to provide for their children. They're always caught in the crossfire, and the narratives always skip over them. And as the title of this podcast always points out, it's because there are memes that exist around topics not related to this, but also related to this, that allow the people that are actually impacted by it to be overlooked, as people just try to score political points, on whatever the news topic of the day is. Because those memes continue to circulate, you never get to the root cause of the problem, and the people who are hurt the most never get any solution to their problems. And that's why you listen and come to Weapons of Meme Destruction, to help you destroy those memes, so that hopefully this doesn't happen again.
Well, it just seems like we keep considering ourselves a first world country and the shining light on a hill of a first world country. And yet the policies that were enacted, the government that we've voted into office, has allowed us to have a third world problem, which is to not be able to supply our own infants with the proper nutrition that they need. And that, dear listener and viewer, that's the crux of the matter. It seems like a throwaway line. Like, even I was like, well, can't they breastfeed them? Like, and then some others can't breastfeed, and there's nuances abound. But what I'm saying is, like, as a first world country, as the first world country, as we regard ourselves as, to not be able to supply our next generation with the proper nutrition that they need, if that's not infrastructure,
that's kind of third worldy.
If that's not indicative of where we're going, if we're going down this path that seems really comfortable, that seems really, I trust whoever's in the government because that's what the government is. I have news for you. If you keep trusting these people that keep leading us down this path, we're going to have really bad outcomes like we're having right now that we didn't even see coming. We got kind of slapped across the face with this. We never saw this coming. But what they've been telling us is we're going to have a meat shortage. We're going to have this shortage. Food's going to be scarce here soon. It's like, okay, so if you didn't even warn us about this, how bad is the meat shortage going to be? How bad is this going to be? Like, it's indicative of what's coming down the road, and they are going to wipe their hands of it and be like, there's nothing we could do, but we always know there was something they could do. Dane, take it away.
So a lot of the issues that are plaguing the supply of infant formula in this issue are cross-pollinated with other issues where the government has set up regulatory regimes which cartelize.
And if you didn't cross-pollinate with your fucking member, maybe you wouldn't be in this position right now, all right?
David, stop victim blaming, okay?
I'm victim
It's not
blaming.
the young mother's
If
fault,
you wanted
okay?
to have a little fun on a Saturday night, now you got responsibilities. Shame on you.
And so the government regulatory regime that they have set up cartelizes these industries to the point that makes them highly susceptible to volatile supply shocks when things go wrong, because there is so much of the overall market concentrated into a few hands. That definitely applies in this situation, which we'll get into in this episode. But as David was pointing out, kind of steaming bowl of foreshadowing, moving into the broader food supply network in terms of meat and who knows what other aspects of the food supply chain could be disrupted. So the one thing that we're kind of narrow the focus on this topic is this general sentiment. And as we talked about, these issues are ripe for scoring political points, or what one thinks is a scoring of political point, by just regurgitating mindlessly these bromides that seem to get one over on their political opponents, but really just completely misdiagnose the whole thing. And these are the same people who get the diagnosis wrong, who say that you should trust them for the treatment regimen so this doesn't happen again. There seems to be a bit of incongruity there. So let's get into it. And this was a tweet I saw circulating all over social media. I have no idea who this person is, but this is not one person who says this. This is one person who had a tweet that was shared and liked by millions of people and regurgitated by millions others in other forms. But this is what a quote or an @BestBell on Twitter had to say. The formula shortage is an example of how free market capitalism does exactly what right-wing fearmongers think socialism will do. Right? So there's the meme. The meme is the free market has failed. There is not enough regulation of infant formula. There is not enough government control over this sector of the economy. There is not enough smart glasses wearing, suit wearing, specialists in government, in some bureaucracy calling the shots, i.e. socialism. There's not enough centralized control, and that's why this happened. It's just a bunch of greedy, evil corporations acting in their own best interest and the profit motive that caused this shortage.
You know what?
That's the meme that she's playing on.
And again, we've brought it up multiple times on this podcast. The only thing that keeps corporate greed from the bigger echelon of the corporate greed is the small mom and pop shops that checks them. It says, we are offering you better products at a better rate of value than they can, which makes them adhere to that price margin. When you expect the government to adhere to their price margin, like the larger conglomerate, like they're making buku bucks, and they can write legislation that makes it possible for them to keep doing what they're doing. You're going to pay like Walmart. Walmart's the best example. It's like the huge chains that can afford lobbyists will always get the benefit of the doubt and will always squeeze the smaller mom and pop shops, which is exactly what we saw a year and a half ago during COVID. The mom and pop shops died out because they didn't have any representation on Capitol Hill. And Walgreens and Amazon thrived because they had representation on Capitol Hill. So it's not the fact that the mom and pop shops didn't plan for the rainy day. It's just the simple fact that they weren't represented. And that's what we're saying that is happening here. It's like we aren't being represented by the people that we vote in to represent our thoughts and feelings. And that's why we can't feed our children right now, which will extenuate down the line until Dane has an answer.
So, so notice, dear listener / viewer, what David just did there. He used his eyeballs, right? If something doesn't pass the eyeball test, it certainly doesn't pass the laugh test in terms of whatever claim somebody's trying to make about what the causes of a certain phenomena are. He used his eyeballs and a general basic knowledge of not even ancient, but very recent history to diagnose whether a statement like this is complete bullshit, and to then therefore maybe dig a little deeper and figure out, okay, what's going on in this exact situation? What's the cause of it? And is the proposed solution from a, quote, Best Bell, whoever she is, and anybody who shares this, mindless drivel that she tweeted, what is their solution? It would seem to suggest that she thinks that a more socialist type model would have prevented this and wouldn't allow it to happen. But as David has already, without even diving into the facts, diagnosed that Best Bell's statement is completely wrong, let's get into the details to show you why the recent history is now repeating itself, because the American people, in general, having the goldfish type memory, don't remember things that happened 6 months ago and then therefore are susceptible to getting these memes wrong again and again and again, unless they're following and listening to and sharing weapons of mass destruction. So, contrary to what Best Bell would have you believe, the infant formula market is highly, highly regulated through the WIC program, which is a social safety net program to care for especially young mothers who have a hard time.
Regulated by who, by the way?
Well, the federal government is a WIC, federal
Let's just beat this dead horse just to make sure that everyone knows where these.
Yeah, the WIC program is what allows families to buy groceries, things that the family would need, but they're on very low income. And so the federal government steps in to give them money. And to be a part of the WIC program as an infant formula producer, you have to jump through all the federal government's regulatory hoops to be a, quote, participating member. So if a mother wants to use her WIC, which by all other references are federal subsidies, if she wants to use her WIC card to go buy infant formula, she can only buy from a certain handful, small group of hand-selected manufacturers that the federal government picked. Well, one of those manufacturers is called Abbott Nutrition. And if you'll remember at the very beginning of this infant shortage, or infant formula shortage, Abbott Nutrition had a product recall. I forget exactly what the problem was, but they had defective baby formula. And so they had to have product recall. So if you have a handful of companies, let's say 5, just for example, and one of those companies has to recall all of its product, you have just lost 20% of your market share like that. And when the federal government steps in with these subsidies, picking winners and losers in the market, what it's doing is it's saying, we trust you to get it right. And if they get it wrong, then you have this extreme volatility in terms of supply, and you see the supply drop off, and then you have shortages, which is exactly what's going on here.
And where did we see this before this happened? Before COVID happened? I think it was in 2018, maybe 2017, when that Category 5 hurricane hit Puerto Rico. Well, we all didn't think okay, Puerto Rico's a part of the United States. And then Trump was out there, basketball shooting paper towels and shit to be able to oh, what a terrible president. But what really underlined that is that no one realized that Puerto Rico contributed 95% of IV production for the entire world. So then, after that happened, we had an IV shortage within the hospitals, which drove up the price of healthcare within the hospitals, which reflected on all of us for our indignation of not knowing what the government was doing. They funneled all of the IV production within Puerto Rico, as short-sighted as it was, to maximize the profits of the production for liquid IV. And now, not a couple of years down the road, we're seeing this reflect upon infant nutrition. And if they're willing to do this with infant nutrition, they already said they're willing to do it with healthcare. Now, infant nutrition, what else are they willing to do this kind of maximize profits for the, huge balancing effect of if this happens, then we're going to kill a lot of people. But we're making a lot of money over here, so we're going to balance that act. It's like the cost-gain analysis. Like, when are we not going to be a cost-gain analysis population is what I'm asking.
And here's the problem, and here's exactly what I would tell Best Bell, is by some estimates, over a complete half of all of the infant formula consumed in the United States on an annual basis comes from these WIC vouchers. So you have almost complete market control over at least 50%, if not more, of all of the infant formula production and where the money, which companies the money flows to based on these WIC vouchers, going to a select handful of people. Now, that is the textbook definition of socialism. Your tax dollars go to the federal government in part to provide the funds for the WIC program, which funnels out to these hundreds of thousands or millions of young mothers that use the WIC program. Your tax dollars are going to a centralized authority, which then picks the quote-unquote winners and losers in the market, and then creates a situation where you have less competition, more cartelization, and increased volatility when one or multiple of those producers don't meet the standards that you would expect to have and hope for your young child. And so that is the exact opposite of a free market situation. In a free market situation, as David alluded to earlier, you would have small mom and pop providers. You would have entrepreneurs that would be able to compete with an Abbott Nutrition or an Infamil or some of these other major infant formula manufacturers to not only push prices down on the competitive side of it, but also when one of the big boys falls, you would have those smaller operations be able to ramp up production and meet the demand when one of the competitors, hits a stumbling block. But that's how the free market works. But a socialized, controlled, central command operation where the government has picked a handful of companies to get it right, and then they don't, and then pile on top of that all of the lockdowns, which create the supply chain disruptions. Again, another government phenomena. You have socialism failing epically, and yet Best Bell would tell you that this is an example of the free market or people being free failing as opposed to
you've heard this,
the bureaucrats sitting in D.C.
1,000 times. You've heard this with your own ears. You've heard Nancy Pelosi outperforming the top 3 investment groups in New York, the New York Stock Exchange. The top 3 brokers can't compete with her portfolio. She's out-earned them. What does what does that say? It says that they don't give a fuck about what happens to you as long as they line their coffers. And what did you do? When that story came out that said that she out-earned those 3, the best minds that come out of Harvard, Yale, and all the Ivy Leagues can't outperform what Nancy Pelosi is doing with her portfolio. What does that tell you? Did you take to the streets? No, you didn't. Your complacency and your feeling good, feeling secure, feeling safe meant more to you than actually taking action when it should have been taken. Like, we are here now because we don't take action against the people that we see defrauding us every day, that we vote for each and every year. That's a problem. I'm not saying we need to do January 6th again. God forbid. I'm not saying take violent action against them.
I'm not super into cosplay myself.
Right, so, exactly. So, I'm not saying we need to storm the Capitol again. But what I'm saying is, just take note. It's your responsibility as a citizen of this country to make sure that we're heading down the right path. And if you vote somebody in that you start thinking doesn't have our best interests in mind, vote for the other guy, even though he's wrapped in wrapping paper that you don't really like. Even though he says things that, you don't agree with 100%, well, that's fine. And then the next time you vote, you can vote him back out. Don't let them stay there for 20 goddamn years and make innumerable profits to sell off your rights. That's all I'm saying. Like, the complacency in this country is leading to its downfall. When you don't give a fuck that all of our politicians are bought and paid for, that's a problem. Make an effort. Make an effort. That's all I have to say.
And I know at this point in the episode, you're saying, all right, guys, that's pretty bad, right? Because, a second grader knows that just in general, a monopoly, maybe not second grader, a little bit older to understand what monopoly really means. It's not just a board game.
I've lost Monopoly from second grade all the way to senior year of high school, all the way to senior year of college. Right. Monopoly doesn't like me.
But why are we told that monopoly is bad? Well, monopoly is bad because without competition, there's no incentive to make the product better. So what you get is lower quality product and increased prices. That's why monopoly is bad, right? And we'll say, okay, that's good as far as it goes. And as we laid out, we could say that although it's not an absolute monopoly in terms of one company producing all of the infant formula, the fact that there has not been a free market allowed to flourish, there is a select few companies that are allowed to do it, subsidized without your voluntary consent, by the way, because, again, as we always say with taxes, you don't really get to pick where your money goes. But the government, without your consent, has picked these winners and losers and has created this situation that has led to what we're currently experiencing. But the bad part of it doesn't even stop there. That's just on the domestic side. On the international side, the FDA limits imports from other countries for things as innocuous and useless as not meeting appropriate labeling requirements. Now, they will tell you all day until they're blue in the face, and please, if you get nothing else from weapons of destruction, it is always to never believe anything any politician or government bureaucrat says, and to always ask the follow-up question. But they will tell you, well, we don't allow imports of infant formula from other countries because of quality standards. You mean to tell me that the infant formula that they're giving to people in France and Britain and Spain and Germany isn't up to American standards?
Don't forget that we had toys from China that tested positive for lead at an exorbitant scale back in 2016.
Right, but that's what the best bells of the world would say. They would say that's why we need the FDA to prevent it, because then I think there was an issue a few years ago where some infant formula in China had some sawdust in it or whatever the case may be. But again, this is not one size.
Taco Bell has that shit.
This is not one size fits all. Just because one country may not have the appropriate regulatory standards to make you feel safe that the formula that you're giving your baby is safe, doesn't mean that also applies in Germany, France, Spain, and Britain or whatever. And here's the point about the FDA bans on international importation from those Western European countries, which have very similar standards to the United States. Many of them are not getting banned based on the contents of the infant formula in those countries. They're getting banned for things as innocuous and useless when we're talking about the alternative being babies going hungry, as they don't meet the proper labeling requirements that the FDA says. They have the exact same ingredients, but the FDA says, well, that label says A and we want it to say B, and so you can't import it. And so what does that cause? That causes that, by some estimates, over 98% of all infant formula consumed in the United States is produced in the United States. Because even if, according to the FDA regulations, which ban foreign imports for a myriad of ridiculous reasons, even if you jump through all of those hoops and the FDA says, yep, pick a name out of a hat, yep, German infant formula, you're safe to be consumed in the United States, you still, for whatever arbitrary reason, have to wait 90 days before you can start marketing your product in the United States. Well, I don't know about you, but the last time I checked, if a baby's hungry today and you're just going to say, well, we know the German formula is safe for the United States, but we're going to make that baby go hungry for 90 days because of just some stupid rule that we have that makes no sense and has no tether to reality, that doesn't seem to be solving the problem. So you have a cartelized industry domestically. Then you have the U.S. government arbitrarily putting up barriers to any foreign imports from any country, anywhere else in the world. And you have a situation where when there's a supply shock like the Abbott Nutrition recall, well, then you just have a perfect storm for a shortage, which again is very literally leaving babies hungry here in the most developed nation in the world.
With all those other options, with all of those other opportunities to just say, okay, well, we have a crisis here. We're going to deregulate all the things that we put in place, kind of like they did with COVID. We're going to totally throw the Constitution out. We're going to tell you to lock down, and we're going to watch whether or not you come out of your house. A police state. We're going to forego your freedoms. In order to take care of the infants that we have in this country, couldn't they lenient a little bit of those restrictions from those people in a crisis mode, which
you would think. One would think.
And they aren't willing to do that. But then they're more than willing to tell you that there's a crisis to feed your child. So good luck feeding your child. It's like...
And they're not willing to do that.
You created this. You created this for us. And you have all the auspices to just say, okay, let every formula in. It's more important that we feed these kids than we know exactly what chemical is in what formula that goes into their body. It's more important. We'll figure it out down the road. Kind of like they did with the vaccine. Kind of like what they did with my body, my choice. Kind of like what they do with everything else that gets them elected. But this isn't going to get them elected. So why can't they just release the faucet to adhere to the human need that we have in this country, but they're unwilling to do it? Put it to you, dear listener, to come up with the answer.
Well, and here's the thing, and we pointed this out with COVID, and we pointed out with all of these man-made disasters, and when I say man-made, I mean government, bureaucracy-made, is the reason why the only response is to double down more. Whenever one of their control mechanisms fails, the answer is always, well, we need more control. Don't you see? The reason why this failed is because we didn't have a proper amount of control. That's what Best Bell would say. Best Bell would say this is a failure of free market capitalism. There wasn't enough regulation. There wasn't enough government control. There wasn't enough socialism. That's why this happened.
They didn't get paid enough money to give it to the military, so we couldn't defend against us because of the...
So that's why the reason why they will always double down, always, until you, the people, stand up and forcibly take back whatever that means to you. Not telling you to do one thing or another, but whatever that to some that could mean the ballot box, to some that could mean protesting, to some that could mean a myriad of other things. But until you demand back that power from those people in DC, wielding it without any legitimate or moral authority to do so, until you do that, their answer to every one of these catastrophes that they created is always, we need to do more, we need to control more, because to do the alternative is to admit that they were wrong. And the reason why they can never admit that they were wrong is because they were the ones that told you, and they got elected by telling you that them calling the shots was going to make everything right. So to admit that they were wrong is to admit to you, the voter that put them in power, that you were wrong by trusting them. That's why they will never admit fault. That's why the only course of action is to always double down. It's always to blame free people for acting freely.
Or the other party.
It's never to blame themselves. That's why, as David's pointing out, they're not going to say, okay, we're going to put a temporary relief on this 90-day ban on imports. Even though they've jumped through all of our other regulatory hoops, we're going to allow them to go straight to market now instead of waiting 90 days because we're in a crisis. They won't do that. And they won't do it because they will admit that regulation in the first hand was completely arbitrary and ridiculous.
And if you think we're being ridiculous with our argument right now, they're more than willing to do that for corporations that have, over the past 10 years, paid out billions upon billions of dollars. Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer alike have paid billions and billions of restoration costs for what they've done with their drug company and the maleffects that have had they've had on the population that they've given it to. And they're more than willing to waive all the restrictions for them to put more shots into your arm so that they can make more profits during the interim before we find out that the vaccine is actually causing problems, is actually not doing what we said it was going to do, is actually not performing as we wanted it to. So my whole point being is that they are more than willing to waive these regulations when there's a profit margin to be gained, but there's no profit margin to be gained by helping your child survive by feeding them. That's my point. And that reflects upon you, my viewer and my voter. That reflects upon you and your complacency to hold them accountable.
I mean, I don't think people that are listening or watching this podcast are necessary. I think that it's a self-selected group. They're not the ones.
The population of America
that are turning a blind eye. Yeah.
Sorry. Got a little heat.
And
getting a little
agitated. The celebratory prosecco is getting to my boy over here. And I guess just the final thought I would say about this is what I would say to a Best Bell and what I would say to anybody that self-defines, not even me putting them in a box, they put themselves in this box, but would self-define as being on the political left, being suspect of freedom, being suspect of corporations, being suspect of the free market, and thinking that maybe socialism is the way to go and all this kind of stuff. Right? Many of their arguments are grounded in a healthy, healthy in their view, but what I mean by healthy is a very strong distrust of anything private company of any sort that is guided by the profit motive or the interest of its shareholders is automatically suspect, and we need to cast all doubt on it we possibly can. That's what I think Best Bell would say, and that's what I think many who agree with her statement would say. And what I always got to say to that is both in the context of the pharmaceutical companies of COVID and also in these infant formula producers here. Why is it that you always have this strong hatred and or distrust of private companies pursuing ungodly profits in the abstract context, but yet when the government steps in to hand select certain corporations in certain market sectors to give them profits that they otherwise may not earn in an actual free market, there's no reason to believe that Abbott Nutrition would get all the money it gets from the WIC programs if it wasn't a hand-selected one of the few. Maybe that would go to a mom and pop or a small entrepreneur or somebody trying to compete with them if the government wasn't just taking the big money basket of taxpayer dollars that it has and handing it out. Why is it that we always have to distrust corporations in every single context except for when government uses its monopoly on violence, the money that it forcibly extracted from its citizens to hand to these corporations to make ungodly profits that they otherwise would not make in a free market? There is a serious incongruity in your thought process if your viewpoint is private corporations are to be distrusted, but they're not to be distrusted when the government hand selects them and gives them money that wasn't voluntarily given to them. It was given to them forcibly, implicitly through taxation. Struggle with that incongruity in your own thought process as you will. Maybe you'll still say that David and I are corporate hacks and we're just, terrible right-wingers and we deserve to burn in hell.
I can guarantee you we're not getting paid like that.
Maybe that's the conclusion that you still want to reach to allay your cognitive dissonance. But let us just be the ones to tell you that there is no cogency in that thought process that corporations are not to be trusted, but they are when government steps in and hands them gobs of cash. Figure that out on your own and then come back and talk to us.
And with that, Dane Wise, Gamgee, where can they find this episode?
They can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/95. Any podcast app, they can find the video. I don't think David went too far down the COVID rabbit hole to kick us off of YouTube. So we'll put this one up on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and then you'll be able to see clips.
I was like, that's my fault. You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, it's not your fault. It's
I was just drawing lines.
I know. Listen, in a sane world where you're not shadow banned or actually banned for making the right logical connections between two different scenarios, it would not be an issue. But in our cancel culture world, who knows if YouTube's going to bring the hammer ban down us.
Until Elon buys YouTube, we have to tread carefully.
Shots fired from the 141st Political Podcast in all of Australia. But yes, you will be able to find this video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. Link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. TikTok we are going to start getting into, and we'll do it more, posting little short clips of these episodes. So you will be able to get some video there. But link up with us in all those places. Like, share, comment, subscribe, rate whenever you can. And with that being said, we'll see what kind of catastrophe our betters in the bureaucracy and that Best Bell wants to support can, rain down on us in this next week, and we'll cover it for you on episode 96.
That sounds fun. And until then, guys, stay safe, and more importantly, stay free.